Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. We'll wait for a few minutes and then we'll start, sir.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Sir, shall we start?
Fine, Dr. Manjunath.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we are going to have a session on artificial neural network in robotics by Dr. J. Krishnaya. So before that, I would like to give a brief introduction about him. Dr. J. Krishnaya is an associate professor in mechanical engineering Department of Indian Institute of Technology, Kurnool. His core research interests are applications of machine learning and deep learning for Industry 4.0. Previously, he worked with BHEL as senior manager as corporate research and development of BHEL, Hyderabad. Overall, he worked with BHEL Trichy and BHEL Corporation R&D units in various capacities for a total of 9 years. At BHEL, he has been working on developing solutions with applications of machine learning and deep learning for building cyber-physical systems of power plant with digital twins of subsystems for modeling, controlling, and optimization. Before he joins BHEL, he worked in various organizations during 2005 to 2010 and developed AI and machine learning solutions. He got his PhD degree in Manufacturing Systems Engineering from IIT Kharagpur during the year 2005. He has 8 international journal articles, 22 conferences, and 12 patents filed. Okay. With this brief introduction, I would like to invite Dr. J. Krishnaiah to deliver the lecture. Sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mani Prakash, for your nice introduction. So just let me upload my presentation. Good afternoon, all participants. I hope slides are visible now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, all once again. Today we'll be going through some details about how the neural networks are being applied in robotics. There are several possible ways. Uh, Now there are very high-end applications as well, but how one has to think when those kind of things are being applied. So some aspects we will touch upon. So here, I mean, all of you would have been hearing about this Industry 4 and its uh, kind of penetration into mainstream. So prior to that, though we have not actually experienced Industry 1 and Industry 2, but Industry 3 we have already seen, and still it is there around us. It is not completely removed from the mainstream, because for Industry 4 to come into mainstream into all the areas, it may take some more time. So the Industry 4 actually it mainly turns around the robotics. Robotics, you can say whether it is a moving thing or statically at one place, but it is doing some activity. For example, in automation, robots do many activities, though they are at a static position. So, of course, you would have seen many definitions during this FDP, or prior to this FDP also you would have seen some definitions for robots. But I don't want to touch any of those definitions, because it is very tough for us to define very sensitive area here. So, but as long as it is any equipment or any system that is doing some activity on its own, whether it is moving or at static position, if it is doing on its own, then we may call as a robot, because that's what we are seeing around us. Like here, whatever robot you are seeing, here it is more or less, this kind of robots static. Of course, these days, you would have seen the robots are actually placed on a moving vehicle, that is autonomous vehicle, and then keep going around and then picking and doing some more things. So that is more advancement in that particular area. But otherwise, that's what happens. So here in the industry, more robots are seen, but in isolation. Whereas in industry 4, we will be seeing in collaboration with the human or humanoids. So here, maybe currently why human are in collaboration means maybe certain activities it would be difficult for robots to do. For example, maybe smelling or maybe uh, hearing something, maybe looking at something. Though for vision related thing, there is a lot of advancement happen, but other areas are difficult. I mean, still in a development stage. So in the industry for the complexity and the automation, if you see, the automation as we are moving towards the right, it is improving. But as we are moving right towards right, the complexity of the systems also increasing. Right? That's what. Like this, it would have moved. So I don't want to define this chart you would have seen many times, but so here, particularly this area, how these robots are the cognizance to robots are given. Um, we will be giving very nascent problem, and then it's the solution in this particular talk. Uh, how it is implemented, that's what we will be seeing. But before that, we will be seeing many other aspects to reach there. Let us move on. So here, as we have seen industry 4, as it is going forward, the different technologies that are coming up. So here, last year is Gartner have given these 10 fields which are going to be futuristic areas. So in that, if you see people-centric row you have and the smart spaces you have. So if you see, if you touch any of these, at least half of these areas are some way or other it is related to robots only, like autonomous things. It is kind of robot only. So hyper automation or automation is a robot. So here human augmentation means in addition to the automation that you have, human also will be placed or equivalent to that whatever activity human is expected to do. So, so that kind of system will be there. So like that, these are I mean the technology is very much intertwined with the robots. So here in automation, this is one example where the hard disk is being checked for its errors automatically throughout from one end to other end. So if you see closely, at all places there is some kind of automation involved, either in the form of this is not screen shared. This is directly presentation is being made. I hope you would be seeing this presentation. Are you seeing, Dr. Manish?
Okay, I mean, for me, it's visible, sir.
Yeah, I think maybe you would have joined through mobile, if I'm not wrong. Dr. Manish, have you joined with the mobile or something? Yeah. So it is. Yeah, it is visible for. I mean, all the people who would have joined through computer, but on mobile, I'm not sure. However, our students, many students join with the mobile only and then see the presentation. So there also there should not be any problem for you. Yeah, please explore. I mean, please let us know if you have any difficulty. I think he logged out. Yeah, he's come back. Let's wait. Let's see. Yeah, Dr. Manish.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Manish. Dr. Manish. Are you able to see the slide? Now he has come back.
Oh,
Yeah. Now, yeah, okay, okay, right. Uh, no problem. So here, if you see this station, complete station is completely automated, or fully automated with the different robots and as well as some vision system to actually see. For example, here some vision system is there to. Okay, here it is looking as a hanging, but okay, appropriate thing would be there to hold it, but this vision system will be looking at whatever the defects are there. This vision system also will be looking something else, and this vision system also look for something else. This vision system also look for something else. So like that, and these are XY stations. It's kind of, you can say, hanging gantry or gantry off gantry kind of thing, where you have a hanging hand here. So these, it is fully automated. So it would have been programmed to do certain activities, and then by sensing whatever, if some hard disk is coming towards this, so it will sense and then uh, take appropriately and put it at appropriate place to inspect it. So like that, this complete automation is done. So here, not a big automation like automobile assembly unit, but this is very simple inspection area. So now, I mean, there will not be any kind of human intervention through for that kind of activity. If you see closely how that would have been, okay, that and this scene are different. Just to explain you, I'm giving you this picture. Here, this is a kind of thermographic camera which will be inspecting this IC board. Here, this is also another thermographic camera. There could be another camera, that normal camera, that could be examining total process and then taking appropriate action or wherever required. But this robot will be interactively working with this. Yeah, how this is hanging here, okay, that let us not worry about it. This first, for demonstration purpose, they would have put this, but otherwise this is how it will be working, right? So here, vision, if you see as a human agent, like as we are seeing, human is a part of that automation, or human kind of ability should be part of that particular thing. So if you examine ourselves, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin are there for all five senses, and all these five do certain activity. So to achieve that, first level is eyes. We could achieve. Okay, for ears, we have uh, audio system which can listen and understand, like whatever the Alexa or whatever you are seeing already. So those kind of thing are already part of in the industry. May not be in India, but in other places where this has become a kind of norm for industry, for, I mean, fully automation kind of thing. And nose, I mean, of course, the up to some certain level, like gas detection or certain, but certain gaseous components are possible to detect as of now. Not like our nose, but okay, they have some specific targets. So if that is what, if it is there in the air, then only it will detect. Okay, that is one activity. Okay, tongue still there is no automated kind of tongue, but okay, there is a nose for actually testing the taste. Okay, detecting the taste. Certain way they have integrated. Okay, that let us not worry about that right now. And skin also in the process of development, right? So senses. So if all these are fully developed, then humanoid robots are possible in the mainstream. Of course, these have to be like fully understood. So in any environment, if you want actuators, you need to have a sensors. So these are the sensors. So for any activity you want to activate, the sensors are to be there. So that's why this particular sensors are important for the robot, because just vision alone may not be enough. Of course, though it solves around 80% of the problems that we have in the automation related thing, but the remaining things are still to be addressed. So some details here, maybe we can skip how the loop of the vision here. Whatever we have seen in the previous slides, so how that would have been working to sense and detect the problems or correctness of the IC board. Okay, the same thing further in, because there are some changes in the uh, cameras. Earlier, the board, I mean, we need to have a kind of board on the computer, which now we don't need it. Just to connect with USB or maybe HDMI port uh, of the computer, and then start collecting the data, I mean video or the visual information of the scene. So you don't need any specific card, because everything can be done on the onboard cameras itself. So here, best example could be this vision on autonomous vehicles. This is what you would have seen many, I mean, forwarded videos. How if you are like looking into deep learning related, this kind of videos you would have received many times. Okay, where the total scene is completely segmented. Like it is segmented. These are the trees, and it is segmented. These are buildings. These are pole, and these are vehicles, and these are pedestrian and things like so. So each object has certain color code for this. So the vision system has that knowledge now to say segment total scene that is there in front of you on the road. So in front of your vehicle on the road. So that's how the autonomous vehicles are working. Okay, I mean there are many other things associated with it, like lidar and all that, which are important for making the autonomous vehicle an autonomous one. Okay, having said all that, if you actually go back a few steps and then see how the system or how these kind of things would have been implemented through neural networks. Okay, here when I say neural networks, there could be even deep learning also part of it. And like here, uh, here plant. This is a very generic slide I keep using, but anyway. So if you assume this plant is robot, so whatever inputs you have, and then this robot has to reach certain position, then this is output. So based on that, whatever input you give to the system, it will reach certain location, assuming that this is XYZ or XY here. So if this is what in simple any system works, right? I mean, it will take inputs. Of course, it will have certain configuration, but generally for the given configuration inputs, we have to give externally, and then so that it will operate appropriately. So here, as I said, the plant could be any of these, anything. And limitation here as of now, only you need to have a data, right? So here, why we are talking about that, we'll tell you. So when a plant or system, if human is operating, uh, he has some desired position uh, to be reached by the robot. So for the desired position, he will know, okay, by tweaking what direction or what torque components the robot will reach that position. But how he will be knowing? He would have been trained on this plant or on this robot several times. That's how he will be knowing. Like for example, when you are driving your car, uh, at the beginning, I mean, when you're just learning, you don't know how much steering you have to turn to take certain turning, right? So, but as you practice and practice, as you experience the road with your car, you will be knowing, okay, at what, when, I mean, when you're taking turn, at what angle you have to take turn so that you will not have any kind of over steering. So appropriately, very smoothly you can go. So that's how the learning happens in the human operator. Whether he is a driver or whether he is a plant operator, things like that. So here, if you see that in that aspect, so he is, in a way, he is understanding the dynamics, inverse dynamics of the system. So this is very important aspect one we have to consider, because for the plant, okay, we'll move on to the next slide, then it will be more clear. So so when you want, okay, let me come back to here. So here, when you want replicate this plant in your computer, then the replicated one has to exactly work how this particular robot will be working. So in that case, what you need to know is whatever inputs you are giving and whatever outputs you are getting, you'll be taking as it is, and then giving as input to the neural network and output to the neural networks. Okay, I guess by now all of you are aware about neural networks. However, if you want, we can also touch certain amount of neural networks uh, discussion also. Do we need discussion on robot? I mean neural networks. Do we need yes or no? Do we need neural networks? Okay. I have started a poll just to see. I mean, you would have seen one yes or no on your page, on your screen.
If you need, say yes.
Hmm? Yeah. Okay. Few. I mean, though few have responded, but all of them have responded yes. So I assume all others who have not responded also are yes. So 100% yes is what the poll. I mean, this is what is tweaking the poll. Hmm. Right. Yeah. So here, so in that case, what do we need to know? I mean, what are all we need to have here as input, and then what are all you have as output to train these neural networks are to be collected from this itself. So, okay, now we have sensors and all that positions like accelerometers through which you can collect all the data from the real plant, I mean real robot, or otherwise through your mathematical model also you can collect. But the mathematical models may be having certain limitations in terms of complete dynamics capturing the through the whatever the symbols we have. But the actual data is the exact representation of the behavior of the robot. Okay, that we don't discuss here right now, but okay, that's what the difference between the data collected from real plant and mathematically generating data. Okay, let us not worry what from where the data is coming, but once the data is there, how do we do? Let's see. Suppose if we want to replicate the human operator, if you want to replicate the human operator, then it becomes a controller. The way human operator is controlling the plant, a robot, same way this neurocontroller, whatever we are going to develop, has to work. So when it is when it has to work like that, then meaning that the desired, when you give desired to the controller, then it has to say what is the torque to be applied on the different joints of the robot so that it will reach the desired position. So this have to match. Okay, now we may get question like suppose in an unseen environment, okay, when we have developed this neural network and this robot model or plant model, we would have collected certain amount of data for certain conditions. But if some conditions are changing over a period of time, maybe the friction losses may increase uh, in the joints, I mean robotic manipulator joints. There could be temperature difference in the environment that robot is working. Maybe when you have collected data, you would have collected in AC environment where 26 degrees is temperature, whereas in the plant, actual working temperature may be 45 or 40. So there is a change in the temperature. So due to that, there could be some, due to some thermal coefficients, there could be some thermal expansion of the I mean these manipulators as well. So in those kind of a thing, how do you handle the situation in real time is what we have to see. So how do we do that? Also, we'll work out here. So here now we have seen the plant, the neural network, and the controller part of the neural network. So how do we develop that? We will see over a period of time here. But before that, I'd like to give certain background about neural networks. So, so I thought of skipping this, but anyway, because people asked, I'd like to take certain time here. So it is very simple. Maybe most of you would be knowing it, but however, for the sake of people who don't know, for them only I'm talking here. So it is very approximated neuron right now. So instead of logistic function, I have step function here. Of course, we could have changed this function. So when we change this function, this also will change. So just to keep it simple, I have used here so that the newcomer will understand it easily. So here, as we know, I mean, neural networks are basically inspired by how our brain works, and particularly how the neurons of the brain works. So here, the sensory inputs from the environment we are giving as input to it. So here this x and x1 to xn, what are those will be different from different cases, different problems for which you are using. Don't worry about this x as of now, but assume that this is some independent variables that actually helps for the neuron to come up with some y calculated or estimated y from this neural network, which helps us to take certain decisions. So here x weighted sum of x and w's summed here, and then bias is added to that. So why bias, that we'll talk later. The bias is here w0 I have put represented for the simplicity purpose. Otherwise people show that as a b or sometime pi also, but let's not worry what is the symbol, but we should understand what it is, right? So here the weighted sum of x and w are taken here, and then here unfortunately I could not give a animation of that, but anyway it's simple, so we don't need animation. So this weighted sum, when it passes through this activation function, so this is entirely neuron. So in that you have two parts, one is summing unit, another is activation unit. Once the summing unit is doing its calculation and then passing that in signal to this, then based on the value of that, this goes to +1 or -1, or depending on what is your activation function. Based on that, this value will be decided. So the output of this neuron is basically the activation function output. So for example, if you use sigmoid function, then its output will be between 0 to 1. If you use tan h function, the value would be -1 to +1. Like that, different activation functions are having different values. Uh, yeah, why out is a signed function? Is there any reason behind this? Here, actually, this the entire thing is what represented here, signed, not after the output, but the output is after it reaches here, and then the y is passed here and then estimated. So the y is here only. So this y is passed through this, that is sign function. Then the output is what after this it will come. So actually it is wrongly placed, but this should have been here. Okay. Is that fine? So here, this is what So this is what the activation function meaning. Like when y is greater than 0, then it becomes +1. When if it is less than 0, then it becomes minus. So this is very simple. But otherwise, in sigmoid function, whatever value you give, it will give some value out as output 1. So depending on your value, the value of the output will be changing. So in normal neural networks, with back propagation and neural networks, we use as a sigmoid function or tan h functions. There are many other activation functions these days, but this is widely used. Sigmoid function and tan h functions are widely used. So let us not worry what activation function need to be used, but how do we solve this problem is what we see. Okay. So when those neurons are connected layer by layer and then form a network, then it's called a multi-layer neural networks. So whatever we have shown one neuron, so each one is neuron, whatever we have seen there. So the outputs will be connected like this. Okay, there is actually some misconception in neural networks. Here, input layer is not actually a neuron, but it is a kind of uh, distributing node only. It will not do any calculation. The first calculation start happening in the hidden layer only. So actually, for representing, we should say this is neuron. This is only the node at which you get all these signals. X1 signal, X2 signal, X3 signal, like that, Xn signal. So this is for X1 node that is distributed to all the neurons in the hidden layer. So in simple, a neural network will have three layers: input layer, hidden layer, and output layer. However, this hidden layers need not be just one, it can be two, three. Again, whether there is any limit, can we just keep increasing number of layers so that I mean, we will get benefit? No. As we increase the more and more layers, it will be only computationally burden on the neural network. On the computer, but the improvement is very marginal. And at the same time, there is a problem of vanishing gradient as you increase the number of layers. These days, some researchers are confusing with deep neural networks with more number of hidden layers. It is not the number of hidden layers alone makes neural network as a deep learning neural network. That is the mechanism in deep learning. Mechanism is completely different. Here, anyway, we cannot completely explain here because on itself it is a big 2 hours lecture possible there. So we'll not touch that. But anyway, so what I was telling is just increasing the number of hidden layers is not going to improve your model efficiency, but generally it is observed that two hidden layers or three hidden layers are good enough to approximate any function. This is given by Kolmogorov long back, and it is also demonstrated and proved that okay, it is what that's what true. With the two new hidden layers, we can completely model and then get more benefit of it. So that is kind of optimum way of fixing the number of hidden layers. So what is the reason behind not having too many hidden layers? That's what I was telling. There is a vanishing gradient problem. Uh, Vanishing gradient in sense, in a few slides we will see what is a gradient. And that as you backpropagate the error, the backpropagation has that is the basic feature, like where you backpropagate the error to adjust the weights. So as you have more and more number of hidden layers, the by the time it reaches to the input layers, the adjustment that is possible is very nominal. Nominal in the sense it's very meager. You can almost omit. You can see there is nothing happening in the weights adjustment. So that's what called a vanishing gradient problem. So as you have more and more number of hidden layers, this is what we'll be encountering. Okay. Okay, this is how the weights are updated, given here. Uh, detailed the algorithm, not exactly algorithm, but the data information is given in this particular flow chart. So our focus is more on this. Remaining all are very simple to understand, but this is what the updating weights. I hope, I mean, all of you. Yeah, what is that question? What about CNN with respect to hidden layers? So there, it is not. We don't say that as a hidden layer. It is only layers. In CNN, we don't have concept of hidden layer. They are only layers where the information is being processed layer by layer with convolution neural networks. So where the architecture and the mechanism of uh, passing the information from one layer to another layer are different. So in neural network, we have a simple information forwarding mechanism. What we have seen the calculation, that is y is equal to weighted sum of xw plus uh, bias. This is what happens at each layer in the neural networks. Whereas in the CNN, there is much more mechanism involved where filters will be passed. Like I mean, if you are aware, the image processing related area, so how the filters like Gauss, this Sobel filter or a Heads filter, Canon filter kind of thing. Those kind of, I mean, those are only a few number of filters were there earlier, but now because of CNN, there are more, I mean, large number of filters have come into picture where there is no name for them, but they give certain unsupervised features extraction possible to that. So that's why, anyway, we'll come back to that CNN if required. But so that hidden that layer, I mean CNN, whatever layers used in CNN are not called as hidden layers. They are only layers, a pooling layer or um, kind of feature layers. Okay, or convolution layers, not feature. Convolution layers and the pooling layer. These two will be keep on adding I mean, one after other based on your requirement. So there is nothing like there we don't get the problem of gradient descent or not gradient vanishing problem there. Okay. So when we see the weight updation, how it happens here, okay, there is some mismatch happened anyway. So previously we have seen the input layer when we are passing. So this OK is calculated. So based on that, we'll be estimating the whatever update that need to be done on the different weights that we have. So we have different weights for different layers. So here whatever ji and kj will be updated. So for output layer we have a delta k. This is what actually the gradient that we'll be calculating at each layers. So what happens? This will be reducing as you have more and more number of layers like here. So the delta k is calculated based on the error between the actual target value and computed value, and then the first derivative of the sigmoid function or function that whatever we have. So okay, how to derive and all that we are not going to touch because again we'll see some pictures I have to give you a glimpse of it, how it happens. So for the hidden layer to input layer. So from the output layer to hidden layer, this is what delta K, and delta J from this to here. So the delta J is calculated with this kind of formula. So the weights that adjustment will be done based on this whatever the total formula I have displayed here. And here we have uh, learning rate and we have momentum rate to properly adjust the learning instead of overshooting or undershooting. So these two terms parameters will help us in controlling uh, the learning step. Instead of two big step, it will this learning rate will reduce, and this momentum rate also will reduce the direction, right? So this adjustment and then all that process will be happening. So here the detailed flow is what given here. I'm not sure whether you are able to see here anything. Okay. So whatever the let me show there itself. This is for more classroom kind of teaching. Here it may not be possible. So here the deltas, this term will keep changing from point to point. Of course, other parameters also will change, but the overall process will be same. So delta K or delta J will be based on which weights you are adjusting. So like this, it backpropagates. That's why it is called backpropagation algorithm for neural network learning. So here, um, I hope all of you know what is the meaning of learning here. It is only the adjustment of weights to map relation between inputs and outputs. So in simple, that's what happens. Like for example, in simple, you would have seen y is equal to mx plus c. So in that, how do you calculate m? Uh, through normal regression methods, we can calculate that where you would have done in 8th standard or 10th. So those that there you have only one parameter, that is m is the coefficient which will be adjusting or changing the relation between x and y. Whereas here, similar to that m, we have large number of w's which will be adjusting the relationship or learning the relationship between x and y. That's called learning, and the weight adjustment is also actually referred as a, yeah, this is when you have only two uh, points, then m is calculated like this. But in regression, beta is calculated, beta and uh, alpha. So a series of data will be taken, and then the relation between x and y will be estimated through that particular parameter. So yeah. So here, as we mentioned at the beginning, when you want to model the, I think by mistake I put this neurocontroller itself, but it is a robot. Okay, let me draw that. It's robot, not a controller. It's not controller, it's a robot. Okay. So as we saw there, the robot inputs are like torque at the joint 1 and joint 2. For example, assume that this robot is only two joint manipulator, and you have torque at the joint 1 and torque at joint 2 as an input to the control. I mean, as input to the neural. I mean, robot, and then this robot will or giant, in fact, not robot completely, but giant one move from whatever its original place to the other place with angle and with some velocity. So both, of course, we can also capture what acceleration also as the output, but to keep it simple, I have used only here. I have only two inputs to demonstrate here. Um, what do you mean by minimum maximum number of inputs? You are saying number of inputs. You don't have any limitation as of now. There is no limitation on the number of inputs you want to keep. You can have any number of inputs, but however, as your x and y size is increasing, then it will be getting into multicollinearity problem, which actually you don't know which variable is controlling what output. So at that time, the learning also may happen frequently. Nothing, I mean, it may not be actually learning something, but some random learning happens in the models also. Though there is no research that indicates this should be the maximum number of inputs, but with the practice, we will be knowing, okay, after if the inputs are not distinctly different, then we should avoid a certain amount of uh, inputs or input parameters. So for that, I mean, multicollinearity check is one way of doing it. Another is through this PCA, that is principal component analysis. Also, we'll know what parameter is responsible more, right? So with that calculation, we'll know we'll get the loadings of PCA, and then from that we'll be knowing like which parameter is contributing how much. Of course, we can also know through correlation matrix, where you'll see what is the relation between different variables. Of course, as the number of parameters increases, you may find more and more variables are correlated with more and more parameters. So that is the problem we'll get into, but there is no hard and fast rule as I know. Maybe something exists, I'm not sure, but as I know, there is no hard rule that okay, you cannot use beyond 100 inputs. Okay, I have used up to 1,000 different inputs as an input layer thing, and also outputs also 1,000. So I have not encountered. It's only your program limitation only, or your computer limitation only. Okay. Yeah, here I would like to tell one point I forgot to mention. So when you're capturing the dynamics of plant, then we call it a forward dynamics. Okay. Why we call this forward dynamics? As we have seen in the previous slides, when plant is being operated by human, you will be intuitively knowing what inputs, what torque to be given to the robot, so that it will be reaching the desired positions, right? So which means, though I mean, the robot has some forward dynamics. For a given torque, it will reach certain position. So when you give certain torque, it will, when it is reaching certain position, then it is forward dynamics of that particular system. But to know what inputs or what torque to be given to the robot so that it will reach your desired position, then that's what called inverse dynamics, and that's what we are trying to do here. So this inverse dynamics is being captured and then made as a controller. So here neurocontroller is what we are seeing here. Of course, I have put more number of inputs just to make sure that there some kind of one to, I mean, we can avoid one to many relationship, so that the combination of these will make certain torque related to certain torque only. So that makes the system or makes the neural network to understand a better relationship between inputs and outputs. Okay. Of course, all here you know all these are desired. This is what desired inputs, and actually where it is current point in time where it is, that information is also being taken here. So this is what we are giving as input to neural network and then getting certain torque. Suppose if we merge both of them, I mean whatever the model you have here, I mean the robot model you have, and you have a controller or neural controller you have here. When we merge them together, it appears like this, like where here the plant could be actual plant, I mean real plant or robot or the model. It doesn't matter right now. Definition. Okay, forward dynamics definition. See, forward dynamics means actually you understood inverse dynamics. That is tougher. I mean, inverse dynamics is tougher to understand. Forward dynamics is nothing but how your robot is working. For a given a torque, how much position change will happen for each joints, or to be simple, to the end effector, what position it will be reaching for given torque is what forward dynamics. I mean, I'm keeping it very simple. There is no maths involved here. I hope we understood, Dr. Manish. Okay. So here, when we combine them, the controller and the plant, as I said, the plant could be uh, actual robot, or it could be uh, neural network itself. Dr. Manish, is it up to 430 or 40?
So it's up to 4.
4.
It's up to
Okay,
4.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it is up to 430. Okay. That's why I was going little slow. Anyway. Okay. Now I got indication here that only 30 minutes are left. So anyway, so this is what the total setup. So where the neural network neurocontroller will take theta as an input, or desired inputs, and then gives certain torque, right? So this plant will reach certain positions. So here, but as I said in the beginning, because of change in the environment, because of change in the behavior, actual physical thing of robot, there could be some differences because of change in the environment, there could be some differences between the desired position and the actual position it reached. So actually, normal neural network, we will not have this learning, whatever I have drawn here. So normal will be only connecting the controller to the plant. So here the online learning is what the concept I was trying to put here, where this indicates actually the Jacobian estimation of the plant, which means it is basically a sensitivity analysis. How much change in the torque will affect on the change in the theta is what for all combinations it will calculate and then give that as a learning here. So when we are doing this, plant becomes the output layer. Okay, this is a little bit complicated to understand anyway, but here the output layer becomes, and this robot will become an output layer here, and then the learning process, whatever you have seen, that wave propagation further applies to that, and then the theta, not theta, delta is estimated to update the weights. I mean that real time change in the update of weights will happen here. So that's how the online learning happens in the real time, so that it is ready for the change in the environment and tackle that. So here I have some how it is working. Here I'm not sure whether you are able to see. Okay. So anyway, this is when change in the environment, like I'm not sure whether we are able to see here. Okay, there is a change in the friction and the payload on the joints, and angular position also there is a change, so wrongly read by the sensor. So if all these problems are accumulated, and when you apply the torque based on the existing knowledge, then what happens, instead of reaching the actual positions, the robot may reach a change in the position. So with this, whatever the learning that I was showing, so with that, if it is implemented with that neurocontroller with online learning capability, then we could see that the learning happens in real time, and then the robot will reach its positions appropriately, right? So this is in simple the experiment what I wanted to show you. So when we want to make it in bigger way, okay, this concept maybe we don't need here. Most of you may be knowing. So actually, we need to understand the level of automation at which we need to have. So whether you want to make the robot very autonomous, uh, there are multi-level, I mean, variety of autonomous levels that we will just touch upon here. So here, basically, this why the different levels of autonomous automation is important. So basically, as I was telling, the automation in the industry 4 is very, like we can say, it is very advanced thing, but to reach that kind of advancement in one step will be very difficult. So to address that, industry has come up with a maturity model for the automation. So as you know, like whenever you have a change in the policies, there will be different levels of attainment of that particular policy is provision is given. So here also there are different levels. So without much wasting time, I think before this, I would like to put slides. So here, with respect to self-driving, so here, I mean, self-driving is only to, I mean, what why have used to make you to give a clarity on the automation level, so that I mean, every one of us are aware about how the current self-driven cars are progressing, right? So at very beginning, the automation, the self-driving car, if you see, the the automated system issues warnings and may momentarily intervene, but no sustained vehicle control is given to the that particular controller, neuro controller or whatever intelligent controller you assume. That intelligent controller will not have any control over the car. This is a kind of you can say one more person in the vehicle who will be keep telling, but we will not listen to him. We will be having our own way of judging the road and then going ourselves. Of course, that person may keep warning us. Okay, I mean, just take care, or otherwise slow down, or something like that. So that kind of thing is there as a at zero level, which means the autonomous, I mean, the intelligent agent is there in the car, but it is only monitoring how the car is going. So if any problem is expected, then it may warn the driver. So here there are different levels. We have total 6 levels of maturity level for the self-driving car, and which may also be applicable for the industrial automation or for the robots that we are talking about, because at the end this also may be termed as a robot only, instead of, I mean, like I think on first day inaugural session, professor was telling, right? So where self-driving car also is assumed as a robot as per the definition given by that. Of course, as I said, movement also may not be there for the robots, but still they call as a industrial robots. Of course, nowadays industrial robots also having motion, with which he can autonomously move around the plant and then take, I mean, do certain activities. So here, what are those like levels? Let us just closely examine what is needed at the zero level. When you want to achieve the zero level, what is that we need? The vehicle condition monitoring also is required, and then monitoring the four tubes pressure automatically, and then alert the driver. Uh, I mean, in advance. So it may be saying, okay, next 100 kilometers, there is no fuel problem, but if we are crossing more than 100 kilometers, then you have to fill the fuel. That is first warning it may issue. But as you are crossing maybe 80 kilometers distance, then it may warn, okay, you have left with only 20 kilometers of fuel. So next coming fuel station, you have to fill the fuel. Otherwise, you will be in trouble. Something like that, it may warn. And then it may keep monitoring the tire pressure, tube pressures, so that when you're going on a highway, you will not get into troubles. Brake condition, of course, that is also being monitored dynamically. And there are many other conditions, maybe road condition, like what is going on in front of your car before, when you're driving. Uh, Whether you're alert or not, it may continue to drive, or otherwise it may warn the driver in nights when he's driving. If he's sleeping, or at least is just getting drowsed, then it may alert, okay, you're sleeping, or something, like some warning may be issued by the that observing unit. So that's what makes it zero level. So in the robots also, I mean, we can same thing justify here in the industrial area or anywhere, certain activities it may be monitoring, right? So when we say hands-on, the uh, driver has to keep his hands on the steering, though, but the control or steering is actually by the autonomous system. So it will be driving for you, but you have to keep your hands on it. So that's what the meaning of hands-on at level 1. So where the cruising and all that or speed set, speed pickup and going, I mean reducing the speed, all that controller will be by the autonomous system. So that's what it makes level 1. So when you go for level 2, you don't have to hold your steering. You can leave it. Uh, so which means the confidence of taking turns and then braking the vehicle wherever required, uh, appropriate time, all that confidence is there in that particular system. So that maturity level has increased, or you can say the accuracy of predicting something, whatever is happening in front of your car, is much higher now. That's what it is, right? At level 3, you can also sleep happily without seeing what is happening on the road, which means in the previous case you should keep watching the road though you are not holding the steering. So just for the safety purpose, you need to do that, and that's why, I mean, you would have heard Google have hired drivers on the back seat to sit on the back seat, right? So that they will be observing what is happening on the road, but still it is controlled by the robot, I mean the autonomous system only. Next is mind up. I mean, you can have your own way of activities. You don't have to mind how the vehicle is going, which means it is so confident and so uh, well organized, well controlled system. So that's what I mean. That is the fourth level of automation, where no driver attention is ever required for safety purpose. That is, driver may safely go sleep or leave driver's seat. Uh, Self-driving is supportedly only limited special areas. So geofencing is there. So here, this is one limitation for the fourth level. So which means the whatever mapped areas only it can go, which means it need to have some prior knowledge about the roads on which it is being driven. So that is the limitation of level 4, but in level 5 we don't have any limitation. So steering wheel is option. So that is the actually the level of level 5, where you don't need to have a steering wheel at all. Everything is managed by the uh, autonomous system, and these are kind of robotic taxi, where I mean, if you book Ola car or whatever next autonomous cars that will release, so car will directly come, I mean no driver will be there. So that is the level of automation. So here, when we apply the same thing for automation, let us see. So here, level 0 automation is user complete all aspects of task manually, but may be notified about certain event or changes in the system. Users can also call on assistive function to verify or prove their work. So it is like similar to whatever the monitoring system that we have seen in the self-driven cars. So that kind of system which will be monitoring your work, but it will not intervene or it will not change on its own unless you, I mean, you can take itself, but it on its own it doesn't. So here it is again it's the next level where it will be assisting you. Like for example, if you are using spanners, then it may hand over spanners, or if you are doing some kind of operation in a theater, medical theater, then operation theater, then it may be assisting you as a nurse. So like that. So partially automated, where it may be doing some activity and you may be doing some activity. So it is kind of more or less it's a kind of collaborative environment. Here, third level is highly automated. The system actively evaluates and presents the solution. So on its own, it will take decision. Of course, it will present decision. I mean, it will present the decisions, and one decision you may choose from it. Something like that. It will not take completely decisions on its own. And then the third one, I mean, last one, fully automated is that fully autonomous within the boundaries of its task. Okay, it is fully trained in that particular task, and so it will completely on its own it will do. So that's where like maybe you would have seen recently some operating robots also come into market. So where it will not assist, but it will be doing on its own. I mean, operation on its own. Okay. So in the automation in the industrial environment also, you would have seen in automobile automation, as things come in onto the conveyor, they will be operated and then passed to next level. So this, of course, all these, though it is fully automated, all these activities are all actions and decisions must be transparent and traceable. You cannot say we'll hide it. Levels of automation is universal or for a particular brand. The Here it is not related to any particular brand. It is the robot. So anybody, any brand, they have to associate with one level. They should say, okay, our robot is level 4, or our robot is level 5, or 3, or 0. So like that, they have to brand or label their robots, but not other way. Okay. So that's what I wanted first to cover this. Yeah. So that is level of automation. So once having those kind of automation, so those systems, if you want to observe closely, then the concepts of cyber physical systems and concept of digital twin comes into picture. Okay, right now I'm not sure whether we can go details about this, but the cyber physical system and the digital twins are very much part of Industry 4, and so which means whatever going to happen in the future, we will be seeing through digital twins, and then take action appropriately. So beforehand, something here, whether fully automated vehicles can have intelligence levels like what we defined as level 1 to 4. Yeah, that's what automated vehicle means. Which automated vehicle you're speaking about, Dr. Manish? Because whatever I mentioned are about vehicles only, but self-driven vehicles. So when you say fully automated, what do you mean by that? All these levels are possible. 0 to 5 levels are possible in the autonomous vehicles. But what you need, yeah, even level 4 is also automated, but as per the maturity model, level 4 has certain whatever the features that we have mentioned here, right? Level 4, it's wind up, which means that the driver need not be observing what is going on. He can do all his activities, right? That's what the yeah. I don't know whether I addressed your question, because this is what exactly I talked about in the all these 4-5 slides. So each level has certain amount of automation. Okay. A level of intelligence is based on controller capacity. Capacity, it's not about capacity, but the intelligence is what the control. I mean, what computer you have there, right? What is the model you have in that particular computer? What level of what is the level of approximation you have achieved about the particular system? And so at the end, what model you have in that particular controller to control your system or your robot or your vehicle. Suppose the integration of, I mean, if to get the level 4 or level 5 kind of thing, how many sensors that are essential to be part of your vehicle need to be come up. For example, as I mentioned in the beginning, 5 sensors, 5 different sensors, sensory things. So to achieve that on self or driven vehicle or in fully automated robot, whatever, the vision is must, and it should have all the capability to assess the environment, which means it should have a capability to see around itself, right? See around itself means continuously, whether it's somebody coming behind it, or anybody approaching it, or anybody, whether it is touching anyone in the front or something like that. All checkings that robot has to do, and all the activities are to be done in real time. So the level of computation that is required, the level of the RAM that is required, or the level of information that is need to be stored, all this will be at the high end. So it's all what capacity your computer has that is sitting on the robot. That's what is essential. I hope I made it clear.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we touching last minutes? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think,
So maybe we can have.
I think more or less done. Yeah. We can close here. No problem.
Okay. So since we have less time, maybe we could have 1 or 2 questions. So maybe from the participants. Any questions? Okay.
You have 5 minutes remaining.
More or less, I think some questions are asked when during the presentation.
In between. Okay.
The problem is we cannot extend the session. So
I mean, that's the issue. But if you have any questions particular, you can write to him. Yeah. Yeah, since we have very less time, then we have to end this session, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this wonderful
Thank you,
lecture.
Dr. Mani Prakash.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you all the participants, and we'll end this session here.
Yeah.